Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Grant Nissly, the founder of MyMBA and financial accountant. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Hi, Dustin. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So this is a show by PolyInnovator, so please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Excited to talk about my MBA and a little bit about my story.
Yeah, it'd be great. And so we're also here to talk about your story, the future of education, and MyMBA, as you said. Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. One way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, nice. So I played the drums for a while, and I was really into music growing up, and that's kind of stayed with me. I listen to music all day while I work, and I love the drums, and it's kind of one of the things a lot of people don't know about me because it's part of my past, but still love listening to music and going to concerts and everything.
Yeah, still part of you. And so you got MyMBA, you had your financial aspects, financial world, I guess you could say, the music behind you as well. Before all of this, though, what was your mindset?
Yeah, going up into this point. So I went to undergraduate. I graduated from high school in 2012. Went to undergraduate. Graduated in 2016, and I went straight into public accounting. So during my time in public accounting, I did the CPA exam. So got a little background in business. I was an auditor for a little bit. So that's kind of the typical path of a CPA. Now I'm more on the consulting side with accounting, but I was interested in business and kind of looking at an MBA as a way to get more experience in business. It was something, people in my family had done, and just kind of saw an MBA as a good path to advance my career. Mm-hmm. And that kind of led me up to my MBA.
I was actually having a discussion kind of similar to this the other day. Do you think, in your professional opinion, a CPA is required to become an accountant?
Yeah, I think it's a regulated industry, and I think a CPA is very important. It's a requirement at a lot of the big four accounting firms. So, PwC, EY, Deloitte, KPMG, first few years of going to any of those big four accounting firms, if you're on the accounting side, they'll really try to guide you in getting a CPA, because they're a CPA firm, so they want everyone to be certified by their state to be licensed.
I was wondering about that, because there's a lot of areas in the world where getting a certification or education like that is required, but there's other areas like in tech where it's not. So I was curious about that dynamic.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting aspect, because there's a lot of industries that have kind of built up the barriers where they require some licensing, and for a good reason. I want my doctor to be licensed and a licensed practitioner, but I think sometimes it can go a little overboard, like how many hours are required to get a license in a certain area for a certain topic. I think sometimes it can be a little bit of a barrier to entry into certain fields. And that's why I love tech. I've always been fascinated by tech, because it's kind of like they're against credentialism. And they try to be as merit-based as possible. And if you can do the work and prove it in another way besides a license, they're perfectly okay with that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously doctors and lawyers will definitely have to have that level of education, because it's just a deep specialization for the most part. But I was thinking with something with more business related or accounting or technology, it may not be as prudent, but I guess that's just the evolving ways of the field.
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of one of the inspirations for my MBA, because, I was inspired a lot by tech and how people are able to show that they're experienced in a certain area. And that was really attractive to me. Mm-hmm. I saw this one example on Twitter where a CEO ended up hiring someone because they basically got to the highest level of some computer game. I don't know the computer game, but the person in the hiring position recognized that this person was dedicated and able to put in the work, even though it's a video game. It was a signal showing that that person was basically smart in that area. So
Right.
he was able to hire them that way.
That's cool. And I love seeing alternatives like that because I think more and more as we're able to prove ourselves online that it's going to be more and more like that, I feel like. And so actually
Definitely.
going into some of the questions here, how do you see the future of education evolving?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think it's going to get more segmented, I think.
Mm,
Smaller packaged and more kind of streamlined education and more of an apprenticeship model. And in that way, I think so on the shorter time frames, I think the 4-year degree is going to kind of it's seen its peak and is kind of going to fall away from that. I think it's too much of a learning and exploring period without getting the hands-on experience, which is kind of the apprenticeship model where you are learning from someone on the job, and that's a priority.
right.
I thought even people like Warren Buffett and investors are bullish on the apprenticeship model because they were, they kind of found someone in a position that was very skilled in a certain area, and they took the time to learn directly from them. I think it's a great way to learn, and it's great on the job training, and I think that's kind of the future.
It's interesting because it almost seems like it's repeating the past where I've talked
Mm-hmm.
about kind of like we're on this show approaching an internet renaissance of sorts. And it's people who are polymathic, like this show provides for, but also people who are just self-directed too, specialists by nature if need be. But people who just want to do their own thing have the more capacity to do it. But there's also a change, like you were saying there, how these apprenticeships are growing in number and becoming more and more prevalent because that's what they did back in the Renaissance, where they had
Definitely.
painter apprenticeship, carpentry, that kind of thing. And it seems like now our roles in companies are similar to that model.
Yeah, it's a tough change, and I think it's definitely going to be gradual. Like, I'm not predicting that this happens tomorrow, but I think the student debt is going to help propel it for sure. Money talks, and when people are burdened by the debt, they're going to look for other options.
Right. Well, and not to mention too the fact that everything with the Zoom going on and the COVID and all that good stuff, like obviously things are changing when it comes to online education. All these degrees that you're paying for, you're now paying for to do it online when that doesn't actually quite work for you as well for a lot of people. And so it is interesting how you and I both think it's really good, but there's some people who want that in-person experience. And so they're not willing to pay the same amount for this Zoom university of sorts.
Yeah, that's true. It'll be interesting how long COVID kind of has its impact and what the ramifications are. Like, I personally would love to get back to being in person and doing that. I think it just kind of opened the doors to seeing the potential that we can get by, doesn't have to be 100%, but we can learn online, and it's helpful because it cuts down the cost. We're able to do this meeting. You're able to schedule a meeting whenever, kind of wherever. So it's been helpful to see that benefit.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of positive growth from this as well. What do you think are some of the pitfalls people face now with education?
Yeah, that's tough. I definitely don't really know about up until, K through 12. I'm not very specialized in that. I think that's a whole different problem.
Yeah.
But I think higher ed, one of the pitfalls I think is just not getting to the action quick enough, prioritizing learning through doing. And that's kind of what MyMBA tries to do, is that we're always creating, and we're always prioritizing basically doing things that we can put out in the world and be tested by the market. So when you're learning through a Coursera class or something, rather than just taking the test and internalizing it, you are creating something and learning through doing. I think that's a pretty generic way of saying how education can change, and universities know that, and people really know that you learn through doing. But I think that's an emphasis of my MBA, is that you are building a website and creating content and putting it out there, and trying to get the experience firsthand as quick as possible. So a quick example, if you are trying to learn financial modeling or something, you're taking the Coursera class on financial modeling from Wharton. And while you're doing that, the entire time you are thinking about creating a specific model for a company that you are interested in. And you're focused on doing something that is actionable. Can you send that model to an interviewer for a company and ask them for their feedback on that model? Can you make an investment decision based on the model that you're creating? So it's very hands-on and action-oriented in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like Udacity was trying to do something like that too, where they partner up with different companies. And so various data science and machine learning nano degrees that they had over there, they partnered up with companies like Google and Amazon, all that good stuff, to connect with those companies and have people have real life projects to go on.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. I saw recently that Google was trying to offer a degree, and I think that's really interesting. I was pretty surprised that Amazon University didn't come out earlier. A specific program that Amazon creates internally that teaches you to, act in the Amazon way. I was kind of surprised that hasn't been created yet. And I think there's a lot of potential in that. And could almost act as an apprenticeship model where you're learning from Amazon managers and learning directly from them inside the Amazon structure.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
Well, perhaps maybe down the line too, some of the more cross-disciplinary people too would take Google University and Amazon University and then go work for Microsoft or something like that. And so they'll be able to have the knowledge of all the different companies.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is something we can do about this apprentice model and changing how we approach education, do you think? I thought we'd go pretty generalized first and kind of dig down to more detailed stuff.
So how can you actually start implementing this? I think one thing is the hands-on learning with a company. This is one of the ideas, like the apprenticeship model you were talking about with Amazon or something. I've been getting feedback about MyMBA, and one of the things we're looking into is, can we team up with a company and basically take on work for them as part of the learning of MyMBA? So say you're interested in working for Bank of America. Can MyMBA team up with a manager at Bank of America and ask them to give some basically case study work to the MyMBA member and start working on that and get a taste for what the work is actually like at Bank of America? It helps the manager because they're able to offload some work. It helps the MyMBA member because they are learning specifically related to what a Bank of America job analyst would work on. There's a lot of issues with that, with independence and data and all of that, but that was a recommendation I had that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So we've mentioned this a few times already. What is MyMBA?
Yeah, definitely. So MyMBA is a alternative MBA program. So basically we try to launch an MBA caliber career at a fraction of the cost. And we do this through 3 ways. First, we are taking online courses through Coursera or other online courses, basically, from top programs like Wharton, UVA, Michigan. We're taking those courses. Second part is we have to be evidencing what we are learning in those courses. So that is where we build a personal website and help our brand by creating a portfolio to show the classes that we've been taking. And finally, one of the last aspects of an MBA is you have to be networking and you have to be meeting people in the industry and learning from them. So we are networking online and we're meeting every other week with business leaders and a cohort that I'm bringing together to network with each other and talk about the classes we're taking.
Are you recording those meetings with business leaders?
We do record them. It's something I've been thinking about as a way to kind of scale it and kind of use it as extend the value of it. But right now it's a tight-knit cohort. So we have about 8 people in the founding MyMBA cohort, and we meet every other week, and we're kind of building a community together as a group that's going along this goal where we are trying to launch an MBA caliber career at a fraction of the cost.
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing I was going to ask too, I know that Castos and my host as well, podcast.co, are both working on private podcast feeds. Perhaps maybe you could use one of those private feeds for your cohort.
That's really interesting. I think there's a ton of potential in audio and creating kind of internal communications within a company, or building upon an internal network of communication through a podcast is really interesting.
What is the ideal core loop then for the system you've made there for your cohort?
So it's a timed program. So it's a 10-month program. So over the course of that 10 months, you are taking the courses and creating content around them. So basically the loop that you're talking about is that we go through this cycle where we're taking a class and focus on creating content. And we're basically, by the end of the 10 months, you build up a portfolio on your website of the classes that you've taken. So you're essentially building a credential over the 10 months. And by the end of the 10 months, you look back and you have this website that has, 6 classes that you've taken from Wharton, UVA, Michigan, and evidence that you've taken these classes and you're really knowledgeable about it. So you kind of have this portfolio that says, I went out there and I took these classes online. I took advantage of what was on the internet. 1, so I'm self-directed and I'm a driven person. 2, I've taken the time to write about it and create content. And here's an example of what I've learned. And so you're building up that credential. And then through this whole time, you are reaching out to people and building that network. So it is online networking focused and driven. So you're sending that URL link of your portfolio of classes to 10 people that you're interested in talking to, and say, hey, I took this Wharton class on financial modeling. I'm really interested in your real estate investment trust. I wrote this essay about it. I took this class on it. Here's a link to show you that I've done this. Do you have time for a 15-minute call to talk more about it? It's basically using online networking to its fullest potential, and that's what we prioritize through this.
Well, it's interesting too, because when I first reached out to you, I made the kind of joke that we're kind of competitors in a way, because my master's degree is taking that self-curated list of courses and audiobooks and resources that you want to do and pursuing it as a traditional degree, essentially. But yours is more business focused, MBA, obviously. And so I was like, okay, it's not really a competitor per se, it's more of a partner in a way. I think you and I are more on the same page than we are against each other. Do you think that there would be some sort of competitor for MyMBA, maybe like Seth Godin's Alt MBA or something like that?
Yeah, I've looked at all of those, and I'm really not worried about competition right now. I think I think this is a changing environment, and there's a ton of opportunity to save people money and kind of think about education in a different way. And there's a ton of people out there, and I'm not really worried about competition. First of all, I don't think education is a winner-take-all industry or scenario. There's not going to be one perfect way to think about business education and upskilling. So I think there's a lot of ways that this can segment. It's not like Google where there's one search engine that everyone uses. Not worried about competition in that way. And I think any company that is just trying to think about education differently, or going against the traditional model of typical MBA, like a 2-year program, or just thinking about it different and thinking about it where you don't need the traditional diploma and the stamp of approval from the university.
Yeah, I think that's a key point too, the stamp of approval. And it kind of reminds me of Peter Thiel's competitions for losers too, because in this case, we're not competing. We're actually working, like both of us building our things up side by side, even if they're not connecting just yet, I think actually helps our space. I actually, at the time of this recording, made a recent micro polycast about polymath competition, where a lot of people I'm interviewing may technically be my competitors in a way. They're creating content on the same topic. My viewers are going to go there and not watch my stuff. But that's good, because then we're sharing knowledge. It's more important for people to actually see the same word or concept being shared around different places, because that's going to build all of us up at the same time. So it's not about competition. It's all about just getting the thoughts out there and pushing these new ideas out there, like in our education space.
Definitely. Totally agree. I mean, even if you look at education now, it's not a winner take all environment. There's many different programs that are kind of, everyone's looking to make people better and finding a way to help people as much as can have a better life for themselves. And that's kind of the philosophy I'm taking. Like if there's a way that I can help 10 or 20 people advance in their careers and find a job that they love more, then it's a success in that way. Don't have to have like 100,000 people doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I was even thinking, this is kind of hypothetical too, but perhaps even MyMBA and modular degree could actually work together. So the way you organize your courses could be through the modular degree platform that I'm trying to build and down the line.
Yeah, I love talking to other people, seeing different ways. There's a ton of information out there, and it's difficult, and it's helpful with what you're doing is just being able to organize the information in an easy way to digest it. Just having a resource that tells you the 10 best courses to take, the 10 best audiobooks to read, and what are the best books to read, that's valuable, just because you've had someone sift through all the information and curate it, which I think is something cool that you're doing.
Where do you see the MyMBA evolving?
Yeah, so I'm basically working on a cohort model. So I'm basically trying to create more cohorts. So we have one cohort going where it's a group of 8 people going on the mission together of a 10-month MyMBA program. And I'm putting together a second cohort now of another group of 8 to 10 people who are also dedicated to doing this over the next 10 months. And then I just kind of see it building on itself, where it gains more credibility and has some network effects as there's more people involved with it that are building websites and talking to each other and learning from people who are driven and care about their careers and advancing in business, and just kind of just building additional cohorts and building on top of that. And I'm really flexible with how it's going. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know exactly how it's going to look like in the future. So I'm being flexible. I'm iterating the whole process. If there's a way that I think I can make it better, I'm open to doing that. And yeah, that's kind of the path for the next 6 months, I would say.
That's good. And so I came across, we're talking about competitors earlier. I came across you through Praxis's self-directed podcast. And I was like, okay, I need to talk to this guy. And I immediately messaged you. And where do you see maybe like Praxis or Crash.co kind of coming involved? Because it seems like Crash.co would be a great pairing with MyMBA, where if someone wanted to pitch a company, hey, I have all this knowledge in business, perhaps I can pitch it to you that way.
Yeah, Mitchell has been a really great resource for me. He's the chief operating officer of Praxis. So he's been really generous with his time and kind of offered to help and give insights on MyMBA. Praxis is similar in that it's an alternative higher education. It's focused for undergraduates, but they have an incredible program going now, and there's a lot we can learn from each other, and he's kind of helped me with going about that. I haven't spoken to anyone outside of Mitchell at Crash or Praxis, but I think there's a lot changing in the education space, and Isaac Morehouse is really smart and doing some great stuff, and he was definitely an inspiration for some of my thinking in education. He's been on a bunch of podcasts, and I've listened to everything I can get my hands on. So he's definitely been an inspiration there.
Well, and again, I think that's just going back to the idea of just building up this entire space. We need more alternatives, and the more people experimenting with different ways of going about it, whether it's for graduate or undergrad or both, or K through 12 even too. I've talked to some people about that, and it's just interesting how this space is evolving, like you said, and I'm very curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, definitely. I saw, I think it's Soros School or something. It's K through 12 alternative, and the guy who started that was on self-directed podcasts. I'm blanking on his name, but I saw he just got some funding, and that was super interesting. I think changing K through 12 is a whole different animal, and I respect him so much for going down that road. Yeah, just trying out new things. That's kind of why I was interested in startups in general and in tech in general. It's just people going out there and trying something new, trying to break up legacy systems and find a better way to help people. And that was kind of why I was so interested in startups after college.
Yeah. So something you shared, a half-baked theory, as in your words, that the current higher education system limits people's potential because they won't try something else unless it's their major or they got a degree in that field. What is your reasoning for that?
Was this a tweet?
I don't know if this was a tweet or if it was one of your blog posts, but I think it was one.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I was just kind of riffing off of the idea that the majors in undergrad they could be kind of restricting. If I was just thinking, like, if someone is being held back by trying to market their startup, well, startups are a bad example, but if someone's held up trying to get into marketing because they don't have a degree in marketing or they're not a marketing major, it just seems limiting. A lot, going back to the apprenticeship model, a lot of what you learn is just by going out there and doing it and finding a way to do it and fail. And after you fail and iterate, you really learn. One of the examples that kind of had me thinking about that is part of my experience with MyMBA is that I'm kind of being a salesman for it, where I'm going out there and I'm asking people if they want to join a cohort, and I'm being a salesman and asking them to join. And I have no training in sales or was never experienced in sales. But once I was put in the situation where this was something I had to do, I had to read all I could about it, ask people for sales tips, right. Listen to podcasts about how to sell. And I've learned a lot about it. I was really bad at this at the beginning, and
Right.
I've improved a little bit. So
Well, I think it exemplifies the point of interest. So whether it's exterior, so something pushing down on you, you needed to learn sales in order to do it. For me, I had to learn marketing for all this content creation. Like it was
yeah,
an exterior pressure to do it. Or if it's interior, like, hey, I'm interested in learning this hobby or try to do this skill. Or like Steve Jobs, he didn't get his good education until he quit college. Once he
yeah,
quit, he stayed in that environment and then was able to take the typography class and different other classes that he was interested in. He chose what he went and go stayed in. And I think that that choice is really key. And I think that with my MBA and modular degree, we're exemplifying that choice. It almost seems like the college experience is best for the atmosphere and networking. But as we've seen with Zoom University, networking is not really too great, and you're obviously not getting the atmosphere when you're at home. So I think that's why people are realizing, hey, why am I spending this money on debt? Spending all this debt to get this college experience when we're not getting the two main things from college.
definitely.
So it is
Yeah,
interesting to point out that self-direction, but also too, like you're saying in that quote and what you just said there too, if someone wants to learn something, if they had to learn that skill for sales, even though it's not in their curriculum, they're kind of crap out of luck there. They're not going to be able to learn it. And I know that a lot of polymaths in a way too, people who I try to direct to for the show, they have that issue where they want to go down different paths and then they can't. So something I ask all my guests here is, what is a polymath to you? So it's kind of a weird segue there, but multidisciplinary aspect. What is a polymath to you?
yeah. When I hear that, I kind of think of it as like an older term for some reason. There's definitely like the allure of what a polymath was, like in the 18th century or something. I'm not sure I don't know why that comes to mind, but I think in today's day and age, it's really hard because there's just it's really hard to be a polymath because there's just a ton of information out there. But that being said, it's always been hard to know a ton of information and be good at it. But when I think of it as specific examples,
Well, what is it to you, really? That's. I don't really need the example per se, but I just want to know what
okay.
you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of someone who is able to have a broad base of knowledge on a lot of topics and be able to weave them together in something that is helpful. I don't know. I'm thinking of examples, but like Bill Gates, for example, he is very smart in a lot of different disciplines and clearly takes the time to learn a lot about a lot of different disciplines. And that's helpful, for his goals because he's able to understand the impacts of technology. And also he's very interested in health and he's able to combine those two to do a lot of good for the world. So like, to me, it's someone with a broad base of knowledge over a lot of topics that is able to use them in an effective way.
I think that's a good answer right there too, because Bill Gates is a prime example where he might not be an expert in a certain field, such as maybe like disease or something like that, although he's pretty well known for that now. He'll surround himself with specialists and then try to communicate with them and try to think of new ideas and innovate. Even though he's not at that same level of knowledge, he has taught himself so much that he can communicate at a high level with them. And it's interesting how being that multi-diverse is important for entrepreneurship and business, which is one reason why I thought this question would be good for my MBA too. Because I think a lot of people who are entrepreneurs are polymathic by nature too.
Yeah, you definitely have to wear a lot of hats at the beginning of any startup. Just being able to juggle a lot of the different fire drills that happen every day. It definitely takes like a broad base of knowledge, but I wouldn't consider myself like an expert at any one of them. So it's a lot of just learning on the fly and trying to do as best with what I have and learn as quickly as possible in a different aspect. But that's definitely been one of the most fun parts for me about starting my MBA is just being exposed to a lot of different types of problems and trying to solve them, and having to expose myself to a lot of different ways to solve them. Reach out to a lot of people who are specialists in an area and ask them for their advice, ask them for what they would do in that specific situation, and try to get as close to that as possible.
Right.
That's been really fun. But my MBA is, you know, one of the things you were kind of talking about is how it's more self-directed. So that's why we call it MyMBA, is you are picking what you are most interested in and what you're going to be most excited about going online after work and taking the course and writing an essay about it. You know, it's what you care about. You care about learning and what's going to help you most in your career or pivot to your next role, or, you know, just what you're really interested in. And I think that's one of the cool parts about my MBA, and also what you're doing is kind of the self-directed aspect of it.
Well, and I think our motivations are the same for creating it, being able to help drive that self-direction or self-education. So this leads me to my next question actually pretty well, is what is the importance of self-education, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think upskilling is a hot buzzword in the corporate world right now, where technology is changing and clients' needs are changing and customer needs and preferences are changing. So, you know, a corporation's employees don't know all they need to know day one. And after 5 years, they're probably going to have to learn new things. So one of the parts of self-education is that you really have to be learning and exposing yourself to new things throughout your career. It's not, you're not done learning after undergrad anymore or after high school. It's kind of a continuous process to understand what blockchain means, or what big data means, and how those are some major buzzwords, but how those impact your business and how they impact your clients. And being self-directed and kind of having an outlet to continue to learn throughout your career is really important.
Yeah, and I think that's important, like you're saying, the outlets, having some kind of way of measuring what you're doing and also pursuing it, because your career is going to change. I would even argue 5 years is a little much, considering how things are changing so rapidly now, that 1 to 2 years is probably where you need to be learning more often. And like doctors, for example, have always had to keep learning. We mentioned that earlier with having certain levels for certain licenses, or with personal trainers and certain other certifications, you have to have continuing education credits to keep your license and your certificate. So it's interesting how we've always had this continuous learning for most part for many jobs. And I think with business and marketing, for example, things you learned about Facebook last year are completely different this year. Same with Instagram. I've been on TikTok for 2 years, and I've seen so much evolution there. Not to mention there's different owners, but just the way things operated with hashtags or being able to do things, it changes so rapidly. So that's one reason why I call the modular degree modular, because you're going to have to change things up either by your choice, like, hey, this isn't working for me, let's change it up, or I need to pivot careers, like you were saying earlier at the beginning, or just in general too, if I need to focus on business now and then down the line, executive MBA or something like that, because maybe you get upgraded a little bit and promoted. So what are some great ways to pursue our self-education path, do you think?
So part of my MBA is we try to get as close to a traditional MBA as possible with the types of content you're learning. So that's kind of the backbone for the curriculums that we're using and what we're learning. So, you know, the top MBA programs publish their curriculums online, and we go on there and look at what those programs are taking and try to get as close to that as possible. So that's a very specific to my MBA situation, where people are looking to learn more about business. So they're tailoring their self-education towards a high quality business education. So that's kind of like the guiding route that we take. But sometimes it's different than that, and there aren't offerings in a typical MBA program. And if someone's really interested in pivoting to a specific area, then we go down that path and find the best courses and content available online, and kind of tailor the MyMBA experience to that.
Helps that person with their particular pathway. I love it. And it's interesting too, because it reminds me of Lori's No Pay MBA, where she tried to do the same thing, where she made her own curriculum with different courses, and certain things didn't match up, especially at the time that she did it. I think it's a little bit easier now. There's more courses available now, but back then there was less options. And so she had to maybe take something slightly different, or maybe she didn't care about marketing at that point. So she wanted to learn more about finance, something like that. And then being able to tailor it, because if you have that power of controlling your curriculum versus going to a hard set in stone traditional education where you can't control anything, it makes a world of difference in how much you're interested in doing it and pursuing it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Lori did a really, really awesome thing with the No Pay MBA. The MOOCs are very interesting, and that's kind of what led me down this whole path. Just the universities putting the content out there, and it's just, I've talked about this before, but just the internet putting information that's more accessible to more people. And that was a very important and great thing that happened with the internet, where there's just exposure and access to high quality information for anyone with access to the internet. And I think the next problem is being able to capture that value in a meaningful way. And that's what MyMBA tries to do. You can go on Coursera right now and take all the courses and create your own MBA, but MyMBA is trying to build structure around the great content that's out there, and hold people accountable to take these courses and share what they're learning.
Well, I think more importantly than the structure is that accountability aspect. They say only 4% of people who take MOOCs actually finish the course. So accountability is the issue there. And so MyMBA solves that problem, so to speak.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the points that we're trying to address. And it's a crazy statistic. 4% of people who start the classes end up finishing them. And it's a really hard problem, because there's a million other things that you can be doing other than, taking an intro to accounting class.
Right.
So it makes sense, but building the accountability and buying into the program is kind of a way to build the structure around that.
Yeah. And so something I asked beforehand too is about principles of your life, and I think I'd be curious to touch on it. What is the reason behind your principle of curiosity? I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I think curiosity, I guess I would just say, it's something I strive to be. It's just to be continuously learning and curious about the way the world works. I love reading and listening to podcasts, and trying to understand just how the world works. It's part of the identity of MyMBA, is that the whole program is based on trying to learn more and take advantage of what's out there and structure it in a meaningful way.
Well, and it was a good answer, but I was more asking about the identity of you.
Yeah,
because this isn't an interview about you, so I figured let's exemplify those traits.
That's true. Yeah, I think I'm just generally curious about the way the world works, and I just enjoy trying to figure out what's going on. It's really complicated, and it's always been fun to just go down different rabbit holes. Like, I'm just thinking about my past. Like, at the end of high school, I was really into politics, and I was like reading a lot about politics and trying to understand what the best political framework of the United States would be. Sounds really nerdy, but
it's perfect.
I was really interested in that. And, I've continued to be interested in that, and I like to talk to people about, the best way to structure society, and it's
What is
fun
the
to think
best way?
about.
I'm not gonna like just let that slide. I need to know what is the best way in your analysis there.
So I'm a big fan of Nassim Taleb. So he talks about Skin in the Game is his latest book, and he talks about scaling politics. So it's just easier to when a problem is local, it's easier to address the problem. So his philosophy is kind of things should be as local as possible. So you should really care about your local politics, and rather than caring about the federal level politics and the drama that's going on, it's better to focus about your neighborhood and the people that are around you, and caring about your community and voting for your local politicians. If the road on your street is messed up, you should be talking to your local officials and trying to address that problem. And that's a higher impact form of politics than worrying about what's happening on the federal level.
Right.
Not that that isn't important, because it is, but that's kind of his idea, and I like it.
What's more impactful to you because it's closer to you?
Exactly.
It reminds me kind of like city states in a way too, where those operate a lot more efficiently because they only have to worry about that ecosystem of it. Singapore, for example, is a city state where the government of a country and the government of the city are basically one and the same. So all the laws basically get passed much quicker that way, from my understanding at least, because it's a smaller area. And I feel like if we could try to emulate that more with the United States, then I think it'd be much more effective.
Yeah. It's a very hard problem, and that's kind of how I saw the US being formed in the beginning, where they really cared about the states, and they really cared about how each state was functioning. And I think it's a good way to think about it. And it's really hard to care about someone who doesn't have a name and a face, but when it's local, you're able to, the person on your street corner, and you try to care for them and care about the community.
Right. Well, I love how you and I both have this curiosity for changing education, but also curiosity about government and how the governments could run differently. Before PolyInnovator, I actually created the United Living Construct as an endeavor to try to do something like that. So it's interesting how we're pretty aligned there.
Nice. What was the goal of that?
To create a hub of innovation. So quite similar to what I'm trying to do with PolyInnovator. It's kind of evolved into that, but I wanted to unite innovators together, which is, again, like when you first get introduced on this show, I have you say hello to the innovators, because people listening in are ones who want to make a change. So the whole point was to make a change and have people have a platform to do so.
Yeah. Community is an interesting thing, and it's kind of like a hard problem to solve. Yeah. Eric Tornberg, his podcast is Venture Stories. I really like his podcast and kind of his thinking, and in one of his podcasts, he was saying that, especially in the pandemic, community is a scarce resource. Like, it is, people are alone and are craving some sort of community, and if there are ways to build that community, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Well, it comes down to hierarchy of needs, and community is one of those, social interaction. And after you mentioned him, I looked him up afterwards, and I was like, yeah, this guy's really cool, and this podcast is really cool.
Yeah.
Going to one of your other principles too, how can we be more present in the moment?
This is another thing I've taken from Twitter and people I follow on Twitter, but Naval Ravikant, he's very into being present and just living in the moment. And ever since I've kind of thought about that, it's definitely been important to me to, you got to have goals, and you got to be thinking about your future, and trying to get better and everything. But most important part is just enjoying the time that you're having and being in the present moment, and recognizing that, once you obtain the certain thing, it's not going to make everything better. Once you make the money or whatever you're trying to do, whatever your goals are, that inherently won't make you happy. But like being content with your current situation and being present is definitely something important. That's important. I went through a phase of meditating a little bit and trying to focus on mindfulness, and it's really hard.
It is.
It's really hard to build a habit around mindfulness, but when I was trying to, I definitely learned a lot about being present and the benefits of that.
Well, some of my latest guests, we've talked about that, neuroscientists and people who have studied a lot of meditation and philosophy. So perhaps some of the more later episodes, when they eventually come out, by the time this is obviously going out, you'll be able to hear it, but maybe that'll help you.
Yeah, definitely. Love that.
So kind of going back to that education front, how can we achieve stronger online education? That's a big question, so answer how you like.
Yeah. In terms of higher ed, it's definitely difficult, and I was talking to my brother about this recently. Like, it's a problem that's been thought about for not the online part, but like structuring education and getting the incentives right to have people learn and be in a learning environment. Like, people have been thinking about that for hundreds of years.
Right.
So it's really a matter of trying to transfer the best practices that have been learned and transferring them online, which is really difficult, but that's why we focus on the social accountability and bringing on industry partners on the calls. I don't know if I mentioned, but like on every time we meet every other week, we meet with these industry partners, is what I call them. And they're basically business leaders from different backgrounds, whether they're founders or product managers or executives. And we basically bring them on to talk about their business experience and help our group to learn more about business, learn more about different industries, different career paths, etc. And those have been really cool because, it's part of the networking aspect of it, but it's also it holds people accountable to coming prepared and thinking about their career every time that we're meeting every other week, and, having that in the forefront of their mind and thinking about their different options. So back to your original question, like online education, you have to have the social accountability and coming to the meeting every other week with materials prepared and knowing that you're going to have to talk about that in front of your peers is a good way to get people to continue to learn and be engaged with the material.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. It's interesting because too, you mentioned the proven techniques of like schooling and whatnot, but one thing I've noticed a lot, and considering the polymathy niche of my show, is that the current education system was built in the Industrial Revolution, which is like 100 years ago. And so we've kept that same, I would almost argue, archaic system of learning and not really evolved it much. And that's kind of been a problem, as we've mentioned earlier in the episode too, where the old ways of thinking aren't really helping people. Sure, it helps us get a network, but people don't learn as much. And they tested people after they leave college a year later, 2 years later. They forgot half the crap they learned. And so that's one reason why I wanted to ask that. And I think social accountability gives people a motivation and accountability aspect to know it more and actually want to learn it seems like.
It's a good point. And, if you're taking, I've seen people take the very cynical approach on the current education system where, like you're saying, it was made in the Industrial Revolution and it's designed to make us really good factory workers and listen to orders. I think that's a little extreme. Like there's a lot of good that comes to from our current education system, but at the same time, there's I don't know, it's really strict, and your doesn't give a lot of freedom to explore your current interests and go down those paths. So it's a tough problem, and I definitely haven't mastered that aspect of it. And that is what we're working on every day at MyMBA, is trying to figure out the best way to get people to take advantage of the resources that are online.
Yeah.
That's like it's a huge opportunity, and
Really
I think there's a lot of value to be added.
What do you hope to accomplish with MyMBA?
So I'm hoping to just create alternatives to the current system. I basically created it because I had the need for myself, and I'm basically trying to build the product for something that I would really love. And so that means having the flexibility to learn what I want, and having the network that comes with an MBA. So my goals for it is to be able to provide that kind of program to a lot of people at a really low cost. And hopefully I can continue to make it better and be able to provide it to more people.
That's good. And so you follow this 6-week content blocks where you take one MBA class and produce a project or essay to support your learning, which I took from your site there, a little quote. How did these content blocks work?
Yeah, so it's something we're experimenting with, where it is for 6 weeks, you are very focused on completing one course. So during those 6 weeks, we meet every other week. So meet 3 times in that 6-week period. Each time you are coming to the group and talking about the course that you're taking and how you're getting closer to creating some content around the course. So start the course week 1. Week 2 meeting, you are coming to the group and saying the course that you're taking and saying some ideas for the content that you're going to be creating surrounding that class. So for example, I'm taking a marketing class right now, and I came in week 2 and said, taking this Intro to Marketing by Wharton, loving the class. I am going to create content around this marketing course that's going to be tailored specific to MyMBA. And I'm going to create content that is going to talk about marketing principles in the way that it relates to MyMBA. Okay. Everyone kind of does that. Week 4 comes around. So this is week 4 of the 6-week block. Week 4 comes around and we talk about an outline of the content that we've created. So I'm working through this class. I'm working through this marketing class. Here's the outline of the content, the essay I'm writing about the marketing class. And, everyone has a chance to read it. Then by week 6 of 6 of the content block, you are hopefully done with the content, and everyone in the group has the chance to read the content that you created. So they learn a little bit about marketing, and you get some feedback on the content that you've created.
That's good. And actually, this is another question I wanted to ask you too. You're taking these marketing and startup classes. What have you been learning?
Yeah, the marketing class is really good. I would really recommend it actually
Where at?
It's on Coursera. It's Wharton's Intro to Marketing class. I don't really have experience with marketing, but it's taught me a lot just about marketing is ties a lot into just business strategy. When you're thinking about your market segment, that ties into how you should be thinking about your product and how you should be making your product better. So when I'm taking the marketing class, thinking about my MBA, I'm forced to think, who is the perfect candidate for my MBA, and what are the best ways to market to them?
Finding that persona.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting. And I'm looking at some of these other questions here, and we've kind of already touched on a lot of them already just because of all of our divergent tangents earlier.
Yeah.
But you offer this curated list of the best classes from the best programs available online, which I find interesting. We've kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. I often focus more on self-education. So tell me the benefit of having this professionally curated list. Like, I'm genuinely curious about what you think.
Yeah, I basically just put it together because I've been going through Coursera for months now and looking through courses, and it's what a lot of people asked for. You know, they wanted to come in and understand what's the best business foundation classes that I can take. And as someone, if they don't have experience looking through Coursera or edX or the MOOCs, I come to them and say, hey, check out this list I put together of some really great classes. Do any of those are any of those interesting to you?
I was just gonna say, I hate Coursera's UI. I've been on there since 2012. So I was gonna mention this earlier because we're both very curious people. We wanted to look at these courses, and we both saw these like, hey, these are a great opportunity. And I started looking at them when they first came out. I think they originally released in 2011, and 2012 is when they really kind of started getting a little bit more newsworthy stuff. And I was looking at it and like, okay, sure, the user experience is new, so it's not going to be different. Then back in like 2016, 2017, when I started pursuing my own modular degree, I was on there a lot. Mm-hmm. And in the past couple of years, they changed it to the point where you can't find all the specializations. You can't see all the specializations at once, or there's certain taxonomies that you can't see very well. I find it frustrating. So I think a curated list is very important, because then you or whoever's making that list can go through the trouble of looking at stuff, because we know how to work that platform. And the same thing goes for edX a little bit too. Sometimes it is get overwhelming.
Yeah.
So having that list can make it much easier for people.
Definitely. Yeah, it's tough to navigate, and if you don't have experience going on there, it's definitely helpful to have someone who's had that experience. Yeah. But I'm really grateful for what they're doing. I think it's an awesome value add to society in general that they're willing to basically put that type of information in an easily digestible way and put it out there.
For sure. Well, and let me just note too, for anyone listening on the recording, that I only got to that point of loathing the UX because I spent so much time on it.
Yeah.
Like, I spent countless hours just collecting course links and titles to put in a list. And so I totally get it. And so what I want to ask then, what is next for you?
I'm committing to MyMBA and making it the best program experience that I can for the people that I bring on. So I think I'm really excited about it, because I'm, really passionate about the project, and I feel really excited working on it, and it's interesting. So, it's been really fun for me, and I'm just having a lot of fun building it and experimenting with different ways to do it and meeting a bunch of people. So, I don't have any grand plans for the next 5 or 10 years or anything, but in the next few years, I'm trying to make this the best experience for everyone involved.
That's great. And so my last question here is, what is something you've never said or talked about that you secretly wanted to?
Never said to...
I mean, I phrased that question a bit weird there, but what is something you secretly wanted to talk about?
for people on the internet, I'm the second of four boys. So I have three brothers, and growing up in a house of four boys was very influential in my life. A lot of competition and learning to deal with other people and all
definitely.
those trial and tribulations. But
wedgies and whatnot.
Yeah. I've definitely talked about that before, but not on my online experience.
Well, thank you for leaving that with us there today. Where can people find you online?
So best place to reach me is probably on Twitter at Grant_Nissly. And you can check out my website, grantnissly.com. And my MBA's website is makemymba.com. And reach out if you are interested in my MBA. We're closing up a second cohort now, but we're building more in the future. So if you're interested, definitely feel free to reach out. There's a contact form on the website, or you can reach out to me directly. So.
Well, and I'll make sure to have all the links in the description. And by the time this episode comes out, you'll probably be starting your third cohort. So what is the call to action for the audience today?
I would say just don't be afraid to think about your education differently. That's a subtle pitch for my MBA, but there's a lot of different ways to kind of get what you want in your career and what you want in your next job. So it's helpful to think about it in a different way.
It's a subtle pitch for yours, but it's also a subtle pitch for mine too.
Exactly.
So it's a win-win here.
Exactly. Thanks so much for having me. This was a ton of fun. You're a great interviewer and
Thank you.
Great time to hang out with.
Yeah, I agree. And so once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Grant Nissly on the PolyMath PolyCast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much.